For many, this is a logical and obvious statement. Of course we are more than a body. I am my memories, my aspirations, my mind. We are us. I am me.
And then I woke up one day, and suddenly...
But have you really asked yourself what the self is? Well, to put it into perspective, imagine your own body. What happens if you cut off an arm? Where are you, really? Here or here? If we cut off your legs, where are you? Here or here? If we only leave your head, where are you? Here or here? This is where it gets interesting, because the answer is not as obvious as it seems. Throughout our entire lives, we have seen countless times that the head, specifically the brain, is the essential weak point of the body. If the brain dies, you die, right? But would it please you to know that you are only a brain? I don't think so. But before you ask yourself this, there is something you need to know. We already know that there are also neurons in the central part of the body, inside the chest, more than 40,000 neurons to be specific. Just like the brain, the heart is also a symbol of life. A dead heart suggests and confirms death, metaphorically and literally. And the reality is that inside the heart, there are more than 40,000 neurons of its own. They form an independent nervous system that, pay close attention to this, does not obey the brain, but rather speaks with it. It also sends far more signals than it receives. Emotions are not born only up there, they are also born here, in the center. So if the brain is not alone, where does the body end and the self begin? So if we could extract all of this from your body and place it into a robotic body, would you truly still be you? Imagine we had sufficient technology to extract your brain, your heart, your entire nervous system, and transplant it into a perfectly functional robotic system. Would you truly be you? Think about it before affirming anything. Logic can sometimes work against you. Your memory would be there. Your emotions, perhaps. Your way of thinking and dreaming, perhaps. Maybe the reality is that, obviously I am not the one to tell you whether this would be the case. Obviously, just like you, I was also born and grew up in this body. But there is something in that question that is unsettling. And that discomfort is important, because it points to something that humanity has not yet been able to solve. There is a question that the best neuroscientists have still not been able to answer. It is called the hard problem of consciousness. From this point forward, I want you to open your mind and try to have no prejudices, no ego. Analyze and reflect on the following points we are going to explore, and above all, use your own judgment. The hard problem of consciousness is not hard because it is complicated. It is hard because it is beyond the reach of any instrument. But no one can explain how it feels to see it. Think about this carefully, because it is for the same reason that it is so difficult to describe a color to a person with color blindness. How do you explain how something feels? How it feels to eat, how it feels to sleep, to see, to hear. Everything we already take for granted every day. But imagine trying to convey this to someone who has never done any of it. That how it feels is what philosopher David Chalmers called qualia, and it is precisely what makes you not a machine, even if a machine could imitate everything you do. But this is not just philosophy and ideas, it can also be reflected in the physical, tangible world. There is an experiment called the double-slit experiment.
The double-slit experiment defies our understanding. It involves a laser shooting beams of light particles called photons at a screen with two parallel slits. If we mark all the spots where the photons hit the second wall, we should expect to see two strips to correspond with the two slits. But that's not what we see. Instead, we see an alternating pattern of light and dark bands. This is characteristic of the behavior of waves that pass through both slits simultaneously, interfering with each other to create the pattern on the second screen. This phenomenon occurs even if the photons are fired one at a time, which suggests that the photon is interfering with itself as it passes through both slits at once.
Physicists were so stumped that they decided to observe which slit the particle went through.
And that's when things get really weird. When scientists used a measuring device to observe the slit that each photon passed through, the interference pattern disappeared, and the photons started behaving like particles. Instead of the spectrum of light and dark bands, we see two bright bands, indicating that the photons chose one slit or the other. So light can display characteristics of both particles and waves, known as wave-particle duality. It appears that light decides to behave as a wave when it's not being watched, and acts like a particle when it is being measured. The mere act of observing which slit it went through change the behavior of the photons, almost as if they were aware they were being watched.
Just like in video games, where objects and enemies only react when we interact with them, or when they are simply within our field of vision. What if this were not only in video games? It is as simple as meditating on whether you are just a spectator or a player. The act of observing alters what is observed. There are researchers who have taken this further, measuring whether human consciousness, especially from people trained in meditation, can influence this phenomenon. The results were statistically significant. How much does the observer participate in what exists? So many questions, but so few answers, and this is not the only thing, not even close.
Throughout history, humanity's greatest minds have attempted to breach the barrier between conscious thought and the subconscious. The ancient Greeks built dream temples at Epidaurus, believing sleep could unlock divine wisdom. Plato spoke of knowledge buried deep within the soul, accessible only through careful questioning. In the 1890s, Sigmund Freud spent decades developing free association and dream analysis, convinced he could map the unconscious territory. Carl Jung dug even deeper with his active imagination techniques, conversing with inner figures he called archetypes. Milton Erickson revolutionized hypnosis in the mid-20th century, guiding thousands into trance states where the subconscious might speak more freely. But it was always indirect. Metaphors, symptoms, slips of the tongue. Never a clear voice saying, "I am your subconscious, and here is what I know."
Roger Penrose is a British mathematician and physicist, winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2020. He didn't study consciousness from a mystical angle. He was a scientist who, alongside anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, proposed something that shook the scientific community, that consciousness emerges from quantum processes inside the neurons themselves. His conclusion was that the brain does not generate consciousness the way a computer generates an output. There is something beyond computation happening inside us, something that cannot be replicated, measured, or fully explained. Buddhists have been saying something similar for more than 2,500 years, but from within. Through the practice of vipassana, advanced meditators have come to observe their own minds with enough clarity to report something disconcerting. The self does not appear. They search for the one who observes and find only more observation. No one found the self, only the act of searching for it. What is incredible and magnificent about everything we have seen throughout this video is that you can use your own intellect to analyze these things and draw your own conclusions, including the practice that meditators have used for centuries to try to observe themselves. The meditation of self-observation.
You practice self-observation. That is an essential part of the change in consciousness. To practice self-observation implies that there is enough presence or awareness in you from where you can self-observe. So, is there enough presence in you so that you can self-observe your own motivations, your own thought structures? What are the habitual thoughts that I think? So that you are not drawn continuously into every thought that comes and follow it where it wants to take you. The arising of the new consciousness is not a better conceptual understanding of anything. It's not a better conceptual understanding of who you are. It goes beyond any concept. Awareness in itself does not necessarily imply immediately that you understand more about yourself. In fact, as you become more aware in yourself, the need to understand my life and work it out diminishes.
This self-observation works more or less like this. Take yourself as an example. You can, with your eyes closed, try to observe your own thoughts, not analyze them, not experience them, not participate in them, just observe them. What these people suggest is that you try to observe how you observe your thoughts. Try to observe the observer until you search for the one who observes and find only more observation. No one found the self, only the act of searching for it. And this is not something new. René Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, spent his entire life trying to separate the mind from the body and never could. Carl Jung proposed that there exists a consciousness that transcends the individual, a collective field that connects us all. Nikola Tesla spoke openly about consciousness as something that could not be reduced to matter. When you search for yourself, the searcher disappears. Centuries apart, different cultures, different languages, different disciplines, and yet all of them arrived at the same edge, the same uncomfortable silence in front of the same question. Who is the one watching? When we think about the self, we often divide ourselves into parts: body and soul, matter and spirit, brain and consciousness. But what if this division does not actually exist? In many contemplative traditions, specifically Buddhism, the human being is not understood as two separate substances. There is no body on one side and a separable soul on the other. Instead, there is a living unity. What we call mind depends on the body, and what we call body is constantly shaped by the mind. Your thoughts change your biology. Your emotions alter your heart rate. Stress transforms your nervous system. They are not two independent things. They are two dimensions of the same process, constantly participating with each other, not independently, but together. From this perspective, the self is not something trapped inside a body, nor is it something floating beyond it. It is the lived experience that emerges when the body and consciousness function together. In life, they are inseparable, not because they are joined, but because they are expressions of a unified reality. But what happens when you die? There are many cases of people who have been dead. Clinically, no pulse, no measurable brain activity, and they came back telling things, not dreams, not hallucinations. Verifiable details of what happened in the room while their body was inert, conversations they could not have heard, instruments they could not have seen, so many stories, but what matters is this. Around this phenomenon, films, series, cartoons have been created, and this is for a reason. These are not isolated occurrences. Formal studies, published in medical journals such as The Lancet, have documented these cases without being able to explain them through conventional neurology. A large part of Christian belief teaches that within the body reside the soul and the spirit, that is, the human being has a soul. According to this belief, the soul is immortal and remains conscious. When someone dies, their soul separates from their body, the body dies, but the soul remains. This is the most widespread belief in popular Christianity. Christianity also says that we are a unity, but that the soul transcends. And yet it does not quite know what happens between death and resurrection, that space they call the intermediate state, or the naked state. Both traditions, and many more from opposite angles, arrive at the same edge. No one knows with certainty what happens to the self when it dies. They only have maps. None has returned to confirm the territory. So, where are you? Who are you? In the brain that processes, in the heart that feels, in the particles that change when you look at them, in the 3 minutes of experience after clinical death, in the meditator who searches for the one who searches, the soul. Unfortunately, I do not have the answers, but I invite you to search for them with me. But I do know one thing, and that's that you're not just an NPC, bro. You're the fucking main character. Act like it. Personally, I'm just starting this project, so if you like the video, consider subscribing, leaving a like, and never, ever stop searching. At the end, the truth will set us free.